Guys, great to see you both. I know we've worked together in the past and we know each other well. We've got various experiences across the marketplace. I'm interested to understand your thoughts on where the threat landscape is for 2026 and where the CISO's mindset is. What are their priorities are? What's their thinking? And I want to open the questions to you guys with that one. What do you think?
In my view, basically, I think we've historically focused too much on tools only. And that technology side, and we've got to flick into helping businesses become resilient to when something happens. And therefore, my big focus when I start is a business truly able to respond to a crisis is number one, and has not just the IT department, but the business.
Yeah.
To do that, they need to understand what's their minimum sort of viable company. Then we've got to get accountability really assigned. So we've got to get security teams which have limited resource, stopping chasing IT hygiene factors and get IT to actually just do patching upgrades themselves without oversight. And then the third one is then starting to shift left in one hand to sort of try and make hygiene factor security and security design come through pipelines. And the other side is shift right and get much more into sort of the real timeness, whether it's about awareness training or it's tool sets to identify what happens in the moment.
Okay, so we can drill into any of those three areas. Picking the first one, John, what would you say? What would you say that when you say the three priorities? What do you say about the first one of those areas? The activities you would want to see within business to bring it more into a business chain of reaction, if you like.
So I suppose the reason I focus on sort of response and crisis management first is it's the easiest area to start in cost and time and effort to actually get in place. So in a cyber event, who's actually accountable? Do the exec team understand their role and responsibilities? If you can afford it, have you got a retainer or a response team so that you can actually start to bring people together and respond to something that happens, as opposed to the controls, putting a lock on every door or rolling out a technology takes time and effort, and cultural transition takes time and effort. So you've got to sort of say, if it happens the day after I join a company, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And you can iteratively build on that.
Yeah, to your point, it takes time and effort to understand what controls to put in place, but to even identify what's in place when you join takes time. So what's the point in taking the time up to do that when, like you said, you could have an incident tomorrow, and it's better to actually spend the time on preparing for the incident and making sure that everyone knows what their role and responsibility is. So definitely it's a good place.
Yeah, well, let's go deeper into that. So you've joined the business, you're in the business, you're a CISO in the business, if the business has a CISO, not all businesses do.
No.
And we'll talk about different size of businesses as we go through this. There's still 5 million SME, SMB businesses in the UK. How do we support them? Let's channel that in a minute. But let's stay on enterprise. We've got a CISO in place. You're the CISO, you've just joined. You're sitting in place. You're on day 3. You're looking around. What's the steps that you take at that point when you're on day 3? What's your 90-day rule set if you're following? I want to understand what we do in a crisis.
It's basically understanding what's the most important things that help that company achieve its mission. So let's talk about commercial companies. What makes you the most money? What is the key revenue streams? What are the key clients? What do you need to do if you're in a regulated space, whether it's about health and safety or whether it's about some other mission area? So you can really focus the resources and the effort. And you have to do that top down with the exec team, because the reality is they're the ones that understand that top down part of the business. And as every business is going to have a cyber risk, it's about saying, well, what are we prepared to sort of leave behind a bit? Not so much focus investment on, but also in recovery, what are we going to recover first? Okay.
And that's you bring a really interesting piece there. For my thinking on this is, yes, cyber sits across everything now. And for a long time, it sat outside because it was part of IT. It became part of business and is part of business. That's the transition. It's a reframing of what cyber is in today's world in 2026. And I think it's a risk. It needs to be looked upon as a business risk. How do we deal with that as a business risk? And the steps that you're talking about there, initially from a point of 2-3 days in, we could get breached. What do we do after a breach? We look at how do we get back into business, basically. How do we get back online? How do we get back doing what we're doing? And I think that's really, really important, because everyone in our business, in our cybersecurity business, everybody asks on client side, and it's been happening for years, everybody asks, that point around what do we do? What's the best thing to do? And who do we get in to help us to do those best things when we decide what they are? For me, it's the adoption of that cybersecurity risk sitting inside of business risk. And where does cyber sit on those business risks?
Yeah.
On that isolation of where does it sit, what do you guys think around that? Is cyber considered properly now at all businesses and businesses you talk to?
I'd say massively mixed. I'd say some organizations look at it still in its isolation, don't consider where it sits in the wider business strategy. To your point there, if you're an organization, an online retailer, your key asset, your critical risk is going to be around securing that commercial website to make sure that it can run so you can make money and generate revenue. Some of the back-end processes may not be relevant or can be, down for longer. But organizations don't always have the cyber strategy together with the IT strategy and the business strategy all linked together. And it's a big problem. They have to be aligned. They have to be working together. The cyber risk strategy and all the actions you take to thwart whatever it is you're trying to minimize or mitigate has to make sure that it's aligned to the business. Once you can get the board buy-in and the management buy-in and get that top-down approach, but also they know what it is that you need to be protecting. If you don't, then you're protecting things that don't matter or are wasting time or wasting revenue, investment and resources. So yeah, I don't think it happens, but I do think it's got better over my career over the last kind of 15 years. I've seen more organizations looking at where cyber dovetails well with business, but I still think there's a deviation where it doesn't happen at where it should.
Well, I think when I look at it, I think around we become financiers really in our own world as we get more into the business. What money have we got? How do we battle to get that money, and where do we spend that money within the business? Do you see what I mean? So is that, I always remember the battles to get the money to spend it in the first place. Is that still the same? Do we still have to battle to get the right spend, or the businesses now realise we've got to do something in this space and we are doing it?
I think, and so I look at it there's three aspects when you join a company. Where is that company as an entity on its maturity journey, if you like the word maturity? So where is it? Is it a startup and their mission is X? Are they still thrashing? You can have very old organizations, 10 years, 20 years old, that still are effectively operating, I'll call it more like a local business, even though they're scaled. You've then got technology and IT maturity, and then you've got the security function maturity.
Yeah.
So that one of the challenges can be that you've got a very mature security team in thought process, but they're mismatching with where the organization is, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And so that's to your point about it really varies. So if you don't line those things up, which is some of it's education and accountability. So does your business leadership...
Are you talking about the business lining up, or you going in as a CISO?
Both ways.
Okay.
So if I try and talk to you about how to build a space rocket, assuming that you understand space science and rocket science.
I'm the wrong person for that, John, but I get the point.
But you see what I mean? If I'm one of those and I start talking to you like that without starting with the basics, then the reality is we're going to talk at different levels.
Yeah.
So it's a mutual language, which is the company is there to have a mission, e.g. to make commercially money, their products, sell them.
Yeah.
And I think it's been talked about in the industry. We've got to move from this sort of technical focus to understanding about the business, and then trying to help the business understand that like all other parts of the organisation, it's a risk balance.
Yeah,
I think the more successful CISOs are able to explain that journey and actually stop asking for money. Many years ago, I had a CFO who once told me, "John, I'm not going to give you a security budget," and I nearly had a heart attack. And he went, "No, what should happen is when you've got a problem, you bring it to us, and if we agree, we'll find the money."
Okay.
So it's how do you create that linkage to help them understand if you want to have your website up, then let's agree we're going to forget about the 3,000 back office staff in the first 3 weeks because we're going to focus on the website and the products getting out there, and even maybe billing has to suffer and you can bill later. It's quite significant business decisions.
Yeah.
But I've presented to groups of CEOs before and said, do you actually know what really matters to you?
Yeah.
So it's helping crystallize that conversation, because nowadays everyone just assumes the IT is working.
So to me, it sounds a little bit, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds a little bit like if you're that type of a CISO in an enterprise business is effectively breaking down the communication between where the IT is, where the business is, and making sure that those two come closer together. Yeah.
I think it though applies to small businesses as well. If you're a small business owner of 20 people, 5 people, 300, 500, you're still trying to commercially make money and make your business successful.
Yeah.
But you might have 1 or 2 IT people. So some of it's about somebody trying to help you understand this thing called cyber can be scary.
Yeah.
Like the space rocket example.
Yeah.
If you let it be. Or the other side is just say, what are you trying to do as a business? What really matters?
Yeah.
And did you realize how complicated your company's become? Because everyone's using tools, or Fred in the corner that was there on day 1, 5 years later, is the only person that understands this product or how that thing actually gets out the door, or this business process. So it's linking those things together in a way that says, right, so if you've only got £1, where are you going to spend your £1?
Yeah. I think the education point of the... So I know I started off there on talking about enterprise and bringing the IT stroke cyber piece into the business channel, if you like, and talking about it as a business concept and understanding and breaking down the boundaries to understand it, and the CISO as well. Let's just focus a little bit then on businesses that are, the 20-man businesses up to the 250. My experience of that is that, the smaller businesses, even up to 200, if you like, they're generally kind of owner ran. So the owner has the decisions and the power. He's got people in there that he's got some loyalty with who you brought along. There are fast-growing businesses in different sectors. There are slower-growing businesses. There are businesses that have been there for a long... They've all got this risk that sits with them in cyber, and they don't have the financial resources some of the bigger businesses have to do the things. And I think that the industry, the cyber industry, owes it to try and support those businesses as best they can. We've got huge product vendors producing the things that they produce, dropping down. There's a myriad of things that they can pick. If I was a business owner without any cyber knowledge, that's very, very difficult. And it's very difficult to get somebody inside my business who's employed by me, who can do the right things, give me the right things. So I become very dependent on who I bring in, what businesses I bring in to help me, or what people I talk to. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit around that, the product sets that can be used, the people that can be used, the outsourced people, the MSP, the MSSP. Yeah. Let's have a little channel about that for the small. I said before, there's 5 million of them, all different various sizes. Let's focus on that a little bit. What's your views around all of that?
Yeah, from my perspective, some of the conversation before was talking about, like, in my head, like, what a good CISO looks like. And these organizations, to your point, they're not going to have one.
No.
You're going to have a business owner that's making most of those decisions. So most of them are going to be looking to lean on an MSSP or a reseller that they're working with that's going to be able to provide them with the standard IT, but potentially that security knowledge, whether they can use them as a high-level kind of confidant or advisor, or if they're an MSSP and they've got more of a security understanding, more security knowledge, to use them to help understand what to focus on. They're still not going to have an in-depth understanding of the business. So those two parties, in my opinion, need to work very closely together so that whoever the MSSP is and whoever's giving advice really understands the business to make sure whatever we're looking to implement works together and that they're pushing in the same direction. But from my perspective, if we work with small businesses in the past where they've not had a CISO, not even had someone really in IT because they outsource everything to an MSP or an MSSP, or they have specifically worked with them and said, this is our focus, this is what we're either being demanded by our customers, this is where we are seeing concerns for us as a business. For example, I've worked with a reseller before that has an MSSP, and they've said, we need to make sure that these specific systems for procurement of products and the CRM to make sure that our customers get all the information and the products that they're ordering, and we need to make sure X, Y, Z is in place. And all of this is done on these devices. So we need to make sure these are secure. And they've given almost that list of kind of functional requirements to the reseller or to the MSSP and said, like, we need to sort these out. What can you do to help us? What products have you got that can support our mission and our goal? And they then come back, and it's a very kind of bilateral conversation where they're working together, passing information from side to side. And, whether it's looking at implementing EDR or they don't have a managed team internally that can look at the actual alerts coming from an EDR, and therefore they look to leverage an MDR function. There's different things that organizations can leverage, but it's finding what works for a lean team where you don't have the relevant skills internally and you can benefit from that externally. And sometimes the MSSP has it internally. Sometimes you have to lean on other vendors and third parties for that.
Yep.
But a lot of these smaller companies, from my perspective, are leaning on that MSSP or reseller potentially that they work with.
I've got a couple of questions on that. And, let me just drive into that MSSP, MSP, right? So MSP, for me, and this is experience that I've witnessed with a new startup that I'm involved in, where we will go to a smaller business, let's say 100-head business, who's doing very well, turns over 20 odd million, and just plucking something out the air. They have an MSP in place. The MSP, they then talk to us as an external MSSP. We become an advisor into them. I sit on a couple of boards to support them. Then we come in, we say, okay, we need to do these changes. The changes typically sit with the MSP inside the business because he looks after the IT. I've got experience of both sides of that scale. One, where the MSP is very, very helpful to the MSSP, ourselves, takes on those changes and does what we need to do. And ourselves, as the MSSP, the MSP, and the business owner, we work really well and everything's done really well. I have the opposite experience, and it's a 50-50 thing. The MSP stands in the way. Making things change becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
What's your view on those type of?
So I don't totally disagree with what you're both saying, but we're having worked in an outsource and outsource. First of all, we're talking again computer language.
Yeah, we are.
Does everyone even understand MSP stands for managed security provider?
Right.
So that's one problem.
What's EDR? What's MDR?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Second problem is that in any outsourcing industry, I don't just mean in security or even IT, but any outsourcing, contact centers, fulfillment, etc. Part of a business relationship and maturity is you can't just divorce yourself from what you throw over the fence to someone else.
Yeah.
And most business owners, even small businesses, recognize that on the things they're close to, whether it's manufacturing and their supply chain, content-wise, whether it's their contact center and what's happened is we're trying to get often technologists who have been trained on technology to try and manage outsource providers. And then from the other side, outsource providers, and I know everyone wants to talk about let's mature from a supplier to a partnership, but the reality is they're there to make money selling product. Whether the product's a piece of software or the product's something else, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. So if you're not, now some technology providers and security providers have started to recognize this. So you hear about things like field CISOs and so on. Mm-hmm. But it's a bit like in the old days when I went to my bank and they gave me financial advice, and guess what? All their products were the top of the financial advice list. So the regulator came with independent financial advisors and things. So you'll start to see, I think this is where small companies think they start with tools.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see the fractional CISO, the vCISO, the independent, actually maybe is that third party, sort of negotiating to yes concept of three people make the negotiation work. So it might be worth that small business owner, not necessarily going to big four if they can't afford it, but maybe going to a more mid or small scale consulting firm, person, individual even, and getting 2 hours of advice, which could save them hundreds, if not thousands of pounds.
I want to pick on.
And that might
point.
be the better middle ground for both the MSPs and MSSPs as well. Yeah. Is to say there's independent advisors, just like the financial advisory, and take some models from other industries that have had the same challenge.
Let me drop into that, John, because that's a really interesting point. Because that's my experience. What I find, having owned a business, grown a business, sold a business, being involved in buying businesses, being involved in selling businesses. I very much sit on the business side. It just so happens that my experience in business has been in cyber. So, okay. But when I go and speak to business owners, I can sympathize with their challenge and what's in front of them. And I agree with you totally. But what happens, how we end up with our service that they get from us, we tend to go in and do one thing. We help them with one thing. Yeah. But the first thing we do is we build trust because we have that conversation and I'm able to say, I've been in your shoes. This is what I think needs to happen. Second part of that is then once you have that trust, then because you're talking to the person who makes the final decision, you really are talking to. You're not talking to a board to make it. You're talking to the person. Then the second point is, and I really get it. They're looking for someone, like you said, in the big world and enterprise, someone to articulate what's going on in this technical world that these MSPs and MSSPs, let me understand that in business risk, let me understand in business, who do I believe? So they're actually looking for that trusted advisor you mentioned before, Nick. So you've got that, we have that conversation. When we tend to have that, then the next step for me, what we used to do in the startup business, and the recently started startup business, is we'd go and have one meeting, we'd talk about one thing. We found we would end up having 10, 13 meetings about different pieces of the
It's
puzzle.
not a story, is it?
Yeah, and then when we did that, we've now realised, well, hang on a minute, let's reverse that. We've created a package of services that we'll have the conversation, say, here's all the things that we think will help you run the business. Now, you may need some of them. MSP might provide some of them. You may not. But let's not have 13 conversations and 13 meetings. Let's have one, talk about all of them. Let's get that out there. And first of all, we've gained the trust, and then we talk about these things. And then we tick them off and we create the package. The package is, we're getting lots of success with that now because it demystifies all of that. It has the link to the MSP, the MSSP. We built it on trust and we take it out there. We use different tool sets and we use our experience in that tool set. It all goes down to that point you just mentioned about the 2 hours of building trust with someone that you know. And I really like that idea. And we've ended up, you're consultative selling effectively, but not everybody is just in it to make money. My driver on this is to provide the right service. And my view is, if you provide the right service, it doesn't matter if it's today or next month or next year, people will come back and buy more of that from you because you're doing the right thing for them and the business is growing as a result, or it's being protected. And you're the person they call when they get into an issue. And now I've taught quite a lot about that, but I do think, the idea of getting some proper advice from somebody, how do they choose the proper person to get the advice from to start that channel of change we've just talked about?
For me, again, I've been consulting a long time now. I think it's about building that trust and having those initial conversations to understand who you can trust and who you can work with, who you kind of gel with as a person. To your point, again, if you're working with companies, it should never be, and I know it does happen, but it should never be, we're going to come in and do some consulting with you or have a sales conversation. Every single product that we offer is the best one for you. It should never be that. Any consulting firm, in my opinion, should be product agnostic. It should be just saying what works for you as a business. Like, for example, when Bitdefender do work with a customer, it could be that what we're recommending to you, we don't even offer. And that would be perfect for me. It doesn't bother me because it helps our resellers and our value-added resellers that we work with, which is fine. But we want to make sure that our customer is getting what they need and it's providing value for them. Which is the main focus for me. To your point, you don't go into a customer and you just talk about endpoint detection and response, EDR. You go and you say, where have you been? Where do you want to get to? What's your goal? What does the business do? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to invest in? Where do you think your gaps are? And you go backwards and you start from the beginning and you go all the way through that journey, because you don't go in for one thing because maybe they're focusing on the wrong area or they're not investing in the right thing, and you need to refocus their attention. So for me, it's about having many different conversations and gelling. Unfortunately, we had the likelihood of gelling with John a few years ago.
Well, thanks. That sounds quite offensive. I can't gel with John. I think, though, to your point, you've both got wide experience. You've got to remember, not every cyber and IT tool vendor has that. And I still think you're missing some of the maturity bit I mentioned as well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're an enterprise or a small business, somebody will have heard of something, I'm meant to buy tool X. And they'll normally ring up someone
100%.
on the basis of tool X.
Yeah.
So, and even those vendors don't necessarily have that broader experience.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I don't think there's a silver bullet here is what I'm saying. I think it's an evolving thing.
Yeah.
That how do you make something that sounds like science, which people are scared of?
Yeah.
Bluntly. It doesn't sound interesting to most people, cyber.
Scary.
It doesn't sound interesting because it's too technical. It's like, bluntly, someone asking me about my car. I'm like, I want to get my car. I'll put some petrol in if I really have to because it's run out and the red light's on.
Yeah.
And then basically I just want to get where I want to be.
Yeah.
If you want me to open the bonnet and understand it, I don't really care enough.
Yeah.
I think that's
And I think there's
why
a
the
balancing
industry-
out there
Yeah.
that you have to explain to someone, well, if you run out of petrol, you're not actually going to get to the end of your journey.
You're not going to get to your journey. You're not going to get to where you want to get. You're going to be able to do what you want to do.
And you've both got these wider experiences, but I think what you asked the question about what you do about 5 million small businesses, it's a systemic investment from government, from the larger selling companies that have maybe a little bit more money to put into it, but maybe not on one customer at a time.
Yeah.
And then from the other point,
Good idea.
from the other side, it's education.
Yeah.
Whether it's what does Cyber Essentials actually mean? There's been the government open letters to businesses. Where do you start? Because it's a good thing, all the hygiene factors in Cyber Essentials, and I'm really supportive of it. But on the other hand, it's back to tools and technologies, which may scare some of those small business owners. So it's this sort of
Put it into business language again. I want to pick up on a couple of things. I know we're jumping about a little bit, but I still think it's going. A few things, right? so the difference between IT and OT come in. One thing, don't jump on it yet. Where does the supply chain piece, those 5 million businesses that are in supply chain, those enterprise businesses are part of supply chain. We all know there's massive change coming in supply chain. It's already there. In Europe, it's coming in, Resilience Act. So Resilience Act brings in legislation, regulation. Where does that fit in? We can, I don't know how long we've got this podcast for. We could be here for days. But, I think for me, there's lots of different things we need to kind of channel into that. But I think what's jumping out from the conversation that we're having is let's make it all about the business and what we're trying to do. Let's drive the business in making business decisions, and let's educate them so they understand and support them to make the best decision they can make for what they're trying to achieve to get to the end journey, rather than understand what's under the bonnet to make us get to the end. So, let's do that. So let's pick up on a supply chain. So, we all know with the Resilience Act that's going through Parliament, if you like, right now, we all know that kind of ties in with the NIS2 side of things. We all understand where those changes are going to come into the supply chain and pass liability down the supply chain. A lot of these businesses sit in the supply chain, in one way or another. The other area I do want to touch on is cyber insurance. Has that matured now to help with all of these different things? So let's talk about supply chain. Open that up for supply chain. What do we do? We could be here for hours. I said that.
Again, John and I have spoken about this at length. For me, I don't think the supply chain or the way to fix and manage the risk around supply chain or third parties has changed in the last 15, 20 years. I think organizations are still managing it in the same way, but I do think the threat or the risk has probably enhanced. I think more people are using, as you said before, whether you're a small business or a large business, you're using, hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of suppliers. I've worked with organizations that have over 40,000 suppliers, and their teams to manage that are 3. Yeah. And they're not doing it right. They're still looking at what technology to use, and they're changing the tool that they're using. But they don't even have a fundamental management framework in place of what to do, how to tier them, how to even assess them in any way. So it's a massive risk that's not changing. But I think the risk itself is getting worse. More people are adopting technology. More organizations are leveraging different things, whether it's, even just AI, which we haven't even mentioned yet, which I'm shocked at. But that is essentially a different third party. It's a different supplier. If you're leveraging that technology, it's another risk. Do people have any idea that they're adopting these risks along with the technology that comes with it? I don't think so. So I think it's something that's just getting ever more worse.
Yeah. John?
So I'm going to harp on. Think of your organization, tiny organization, big one, as 3 lenses. One, how do you make money? And what things do you need, whether it's a tool, a person, a supplier, what do you need for that? Second one, what do you need to operate? So I need tool X, I need my plant machinery, I need my CRM tool, I need a phone, whatever it is. Third one is, what are you regulated by, if anything? So whether it's basic GDPR or it's right the way through to health and safety regulations or financial services regulations, those 3 factors in a Venn diagram mean where they overlap, that's where you start. And that's how you can start with 40,000 vendors. That's how you can start if you're a 10-person business. So think of it this way, in a 10-person business, all your systems go down, you've outsourced payroll, how do you do pay?
Yeah.
Now, you might.
So back onto business again.
It might be really simple. I walk into the bank and I draw out the money out the cash. If you're a small business, if you're a major business, how are you going to phone up the bank and get 10,000 people paid? So that's how you operate stuff. How you make money if your main manufacturing goes down, or your main way of getting product is through a third party, you don't make it, you just reship it, then that's the one that matters.
Yeah. So are you still trying to get to the crown jewels of where the business needs to be here by the conversation?
Yeah, without understanding those 3, which you can do top down very simply in a small business and even in a big business. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's got to be really, really simple. Yeah. And go, what do you need to ship stuff out the door? Yeah. In some businesses, you might still carry on shipping stuff and catch up with billing later.
Yeah.
And that's your risk decision. because maybe you can't afford 2 finance tools, or there's only one person in the finance team if you're those small businesses, or maybe you do it on a Sunday night as a very small business yourself. So you've got to really look at that, and that goes back to how do you focus on the 40,000. You just go, which are the ones, and if you have to start with the top 10 and that's the best you can do, then start with the top 10 that really matter.
What you're saying, John, what I'm hearing, so let me clarify that it is what you're saying, is effectively the answer's similar to what we've said on the other things. Understand your business, understand what's important to the business to make it operate and to get to its goal. And then once you understand that, take it back to, if it's the supply chain, take it back to the supply chain. Which ones in the supply chain help you achieve your goal? Is that it?
Yeah.
Right.
Because otherwise you're playing whack-a-mole with your money. So whether you've got £1,000 or £10 million, if you don't understand where you're focusing it, bear in mind we all agree, enterprise or small company, nobody can actually afford to fix everything. Then all you're doing is playing whack-a-mole with your funds.
What that sounds like to me, you're a CISO, you've been a CISO at many businesses. We've worked together, and as you as a CISO, as me as a provider of service in there, and we've worked on business angles and different things, and we're friends, right? Now, for me, if from that perspective, where you're understanding the business and where to go with the business, you sound more like a business consultant than a CISO, right? Is that, do you think there's a stretch over to that?
I think that's where it's been going.
Okay.
20 years ago, it was mainly the attacks, the negative stuff was mainly against a data center in a building with a few servers, whatever scale you were.
Agreed.
So it was an IT focused thing. And the business had an amount of resilience because the technology itself, whether it was cyber attacked or it was just the technology, was a bit more fragile. So people bought 2 servers, or they built 2 comms rooms, or so the business itself was used to carry on operating. And businesses 20 or 30 years ago weren't as automated as they are now. And there wasn't so much home working, everyone had to travel into work. And obviously COVID helped us get rid of that challenge, which was a challenge for many businesses, resilience of the office space. But what's happened now is we're more digital, we're more reliant on it in every business. Local small business managers walk around with their mobile phones, so do big executives in large enterprises. So that whole piece is there. So I think the role has changed, and it's having to learn to let go and say we can't fix it all and we can't afford to. But that creates an accountability friction, because that decision's often been made in IT and by CISOs. And actually now it's about business survivability. So I think it's forced that transition for most people.
Moving very quickly, isn't it? Everything's moving very quickly.
I mean,
digitally, it's very, you dropped in the word AI, the forbidden word AI. I find with AI, I'll give a view for me on AI. I think it's really interesting what you're talking about, because my question around, are we CISOs now in that industry, or are we business people? Not just CISOs.
I think it's the measure of a CISO going forward is how fast can you help recovery? And how can you try and minimize the impact of an event? Because we're having to move away from, we're trying to stop everything.
So how do we fix it?
The fire brigade have to stop all fires in England.
The
fires are still going to happen sometimes. Hopefully our houses are better and they're built nicer and we've got fire alarms and smoke detectors. So but the reality is, we're never going to stop fires. We're never going to stop cyber events. That's been the government's message for a while. Therefore, how do you limit the impact to the business and get the business operating again as fast as possible is more of a measure now than have I fully understood all my attack surface, which might take you 2 years to figure out in a very complex organisation, and have a fixed 40,000 vendors. There is an amount of risk that business takes anyway. You're helping make it more transparent for risk-informed decision-making. So I've only got £10. I'm going to spend the £10 there. You
talk about government helping with that, about that education, about understanding that 2-hour conversation with the business owner, right? That we talked about before.
Government, big business.
And everything. So you get that understanding of where things are going and where the changes are and what we do. And that's a great start. But and Nick, you talked about it yourself as well. It's about building trust to get to the point where you could, no one knows everything, but we all know something. We know people who know something more, and we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to service, because we started this off as, what is the threat landscape looking like, and the important things for a CISO in 2026. That's where we started. We're jumping to lots of different areas. Some of it's, it's really useful. It's all really useful as a conversation point. We did talk about, we mentioned AI, and I'll give a view on AI, right? My view, it's fantastic, isn't it? If you use it the right way, what is the right way? But if you use it we're speeding up the process of anything that we do because it gives us an answer. What I'm finding, which is, and this is my own personal experience, so agree, disagree, let's debate. What I'm finding is some people using AI to come back to me with a veneer that says, "Oh, I know all of this," and they're throwing the words at me. When I question them on let's go a little bit deeper in security, when they don't understand it at all. So it's bringing it further to get them a veneer of understanding. But I'm finding the depth of experience comes out when you kind of go deeper and deeper and deeper, because you can't always rely on AI. You're going to go back to an individual who's got the experience. So I guess my question is, where's the upside for AI? Where's the downside for AI as we see it with security in mind against business risk? Hard question, difficult questions, there forever.
I mean, at a high level, I think there's massive upsides and massive downsides. To your point there, can you trust AI completely? No, everyone should be fact checking the AI, and if they're creating a model, utilizing a model, they should still be fundamentally checking the output. I think the biggest example I always give is when people started using ChatGPT, you could ask it how many R's are in strawberry. It would always get it wrong because it was programmed to give an answer rather than read the word and count how many R's are in strawberry. Super basic, but it would get it wrong. And it's a really good example of how AI, if it's trained badly, if it's data poisoning and all these different attacks that could happen and impact AI, if they occur, the output is just factually incorrect and a waste of time. However, from a product perspective, from a user process perspective, you can utilize AI, as you said, to help create content, help to streamline processes, help to reword your thinking. If you put something in text and you write a long email and you want it to double check what it's saying and rephrase it, make sure that your key points are clear and concise and all that kind of stuff, you can help on that perspective. From a security perspective, there's a lot of tools now out there that leverage AI for simple things like recommendations. It could be a compliance type tool, a GRC type tool that you put loads of information into, and at the end it auto populates using AI a nice, clear, concise recommendation of what you should do next. There's other providers that are utilizing AI to help basically correlate different information together to provide you an alert or a detection that is supposedly and is better because of the fact that it's utilizing AI. Again, how do organizations know this? If you're buying and procuring these products, it's hard to say, but it can definitely be used in a positive light. But then on the flip side, from a offensive capability, it's also helping the attackers, whether it's, again, basic phishing, an organization or a threat actor can be utilizing the AI to tailor that phishing email to make it look a bit more comprehensive and have the English look a bit better. Sometimes it's still obvious. But then again, it can be used, hopefully not so much in the future, but to have proper malware-driven AI where AI is helping to create that malware, refine the malware. We're seeing threat actors now taking pieces of malware from known threat actor groups and making slight changes to it. Whether they're using AI or not, it's hard to say, but we think that a lot of threat actors, not organizations, a lot of threat actors don't have the capability to rewrite the code and the malware itself. So we believe they are using AI to make the slight changes because they just don't have the skill set capability to do so. So I think there's going to be, security is always cat and mouse. It's always kind of what are they doing? What do we have to do to defend against it? But I think there's positives on both sides. Things that Bitdefender are doing, which I'm sure other organizations are doing as well. For us, for our detection capabilities and all of our technology and products, we have both an offensive and a defensive AI model. The reason is the offensive one is creating things that are not seen in the wild and that are constantly creating new patterns, new pieces of malware that we're then creating defensive, basically patterns and recognition for. So there's ways that we can even use it in a positive way on the offensive side to make sure that our defensive products and capabilities are improving over time. So it's a topic we could probably talk to for about 4 or 5 hours.
It sounds like a minefield to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things it can be used for.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're seeing in your perspective.
Yeah, I think like any technology transformation, I like it because that's why I'm in the technology sector. So I think it's a good thing overall. Like everything, it can be misused. So you've got 3 aspects. You've got the business is trying to use it to create value, create efficiencies, etc. And that's not going to change. That's not changed with any digital technology in the last 30, 40 years. It's going to get adopted. The internet was adopted for good to start with, and then people realized they could be leveraged for other things. And bad people will always follow the money, or bad people from a different perspective will always use things for disruption.
Yeah,
that's not different and not changed. So business driving and using AI, I think, is good. It's good for business. It's acceleration, etc. It's velocity. It hopefully will remove boring tasks for everybody, which most people don't like. We've automated factories and things for the same reasons over the years. Automated parts of farming, so it's going to happen. I think then, as you say, the attackers are going to use it. Their one advantage is they normally have a singular mission, and so they're able to put all their effort into a mission, steal money or disrupt. And that's not what any company has, because a company's single mission isn't defend to that. A company's single mission is protect the country, or make my product, or run my website. So you'll always be at a disadvantage to the attackers. And then, as you say, there's a lot of opportunity in the right types of AI usage from the defender side. So I think we've got to start dropping some of the old-fashioned tools faster, get the focus on the newer tools faster, and actually rethink some of our models and thinking. So security awareness training, let's go and tell everyone once a year. Back to that sort of how do you change culture?
It's culture then.
The older people remember things like the green code adverts that made you sort of look across the road and make you wear a seatbelt.
Look left, look right.
I think our government is starting to do that, but not mainstream enough, whereas some other countries are already doing that. At a company level, we're still going to make you torture your way through 20 different compliance packs if you're in a very heavily regulated company in your first 30 days. How do you make that training more absorbable by people in the modern age, when we're used to people, younger generation, particularly TikToks and Instagrams and various things. So I don't think we've matured enough back to tools from vendors in security, that they're still trying to make tools for mechanics, not tools for businesses, and not tools for functional users.
Okay. In the industry, being in IT as we all are, AI has been around for a long time, hasn't it? It's
new. The GPT, I think people are talking about.
ChatGPT, isn't it? And people are kind of ChatGPT. People are talking about, and but if you, I did a talk, and a couple of months ago, and I asked the question to the room. Think back a year ago, who knew of ChatGPT? Who was using ChatGPT? Think now, who knows about it and who uses it?
It's mainstream.
It's mainstream. It's taken off, and people are using it. I don't think we'll answer AI. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, but it's there for good, I think, isn't it?
100%.
That's the point.
I think the one thing we're seeing, which is interesting from our perspective anyway, is that as much as people are worried about AI and they're thinking that the attacks are going to become more complex and more difficult to protect against, not that we don't believe that might happen eventually, and I'm sure it will in some small cases. What we're actually saying is that we believe that the volume of attacks may increase, but on some of the less sophisticated attack methods, on the basis that some people that wouldn't have the capability to do that on their own would now be leveraging all this AI technology to do that. So that's where it comes back to business risk. Some of the basic cyber hygiene will still help you thwart a lot of the more basic attacks that are going to come through in 2026, even though I'm sure there'll be some more complex, more targeted, sophisticated attacks using AI.
Okay. I think, listen, again, it's there for the long term. It can be used for good and bad, but it is absolutely there for the long term. Let's change focus again. PQC, post-quantum cryptography. What's your view on that? Everyone, I talk to people, and people talk to me around it. Oh, it's a big thing. It's, encryption's going to die if someone gets quantum. You got Apple and Google driving the change there. Both of them saying they're going to get there first. If it gets into the wrong hands, we're hearing, in my view, some of the bad actors who are taking encrypted data now, storing it, and in the future they're going to, when they can, they'll crack it open. They'll have the data anyway. What's your view? What do we do?
What do we do is an interesting an interesting question to finish with. My view on it in general is, I believe it's true. When we get there, all of the things and the disaster scenarios that we keep talking about will happen. It definitely will be easier to break some of the kind of algorithms that we use these days, and organizations should be preparing. But again, it's extremely costly to start, ripping up everything that you've got at the moment and just putting in specific algorithms that will be protected in the future. Again, it's going to be more costly. It's going to be more consuming.
Let's just jump. If I can jump in on that, Nick, because what the government is saying is, regulated businesses, critical national infrastructure need things in place by a plan in place by 2030. They need to implement it by 3 years, like 2033. And with the use now of AI on both sides of the fence, good and bad, that that's bringing the time frames nearer, and closer. So, and you always, with changes like that where you know something's coming, people are referring to PQC as like the year 2000 change.
I was going to say it's like millennium change.
Yeah, it's millennium change. And millennium change, if you were in IT, Nick, you're slightly younger than us. But
I still remember planes are going to fall out the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And I had people placed in my business. We had people placed at the major banks and doing lots of different things, and it kind of fizzled through. Really, nothing really happened. PQC isn't like that, I don't think.
Did you not think some of the millennium, because you can see both sides of the story, there were genuine tests that proved things were broken, so companies did have to spend millions of pounds. I worked in a telco where we spent millions because a lot of the routers in testing proved when you accelerate the data, they'd fall over. So I think the fizzle out is because there was a lot of preparation.
I think there was lots of preparation done.
Maybe overspend in some areas, maybe it didn't all need to be spent, but that's the same with everything.
And it's the question, then that comes out, do you spend the time to go and understand what worked, what didn't work, why did we did it, did we not do it? But hype comes behind these things. Hype's been around AI. Hype will come around PQC. PQC is different.
It's also harder to test.
It's not the millennium change.
No, you're right. But so most regulators are focusing on risk to that activity.
Yeah.
On behalf of the people or country elements that are serviced by that industry sector.
Okay.
So if you think about the underlying intent, it's to protect the country.
Yeah.
And the citizens in the country is typically what most regulations are around. So the interpretation of that is, unfortunately, it's back to what I was saying, is do you understand the core of your business? And therefore, where do you prioritize where you're going to focus first to keep those minimum services going? So if cash point machines are running on a type of encryption that is requiring some replacement, and the country and the government and the banks think that cash machines are the right thing to do, then presumably they prioritise that's where they do first. Whereas maybe some internal system that they have is still important to that business, but maybe is less important to the regulator in the country. So that's even when NIS 2 starts to say what's relevant, what's scope, what's minimum viable company. On the other hand, many organisations, because to your point, there's SMEs of all sizes that support these different industries, whether it's manufacturing, electricity, financial services. Most companies are reliant on products, not security products, but on products being created with the right things in them. So if you can't buy a router with a new encryption type in it, then even if there's a regulation, how do you buy the router?
Yeah.
I've worked in telco
so
where you're reliant on industry moving. So there are a lot of moving parts here where what industries want to build things. So let's say you're a global manufacturer of, a router, and the UK is going 5 years ahead of someone else, and the UK is 3% of your global revenue. Yeah. You may choose as a manufacturer not to sell in the UK for a period of years until the technology is caught up and you've got enough of a customer base to sell to the UK, as an example. So if you're then a UK company, you may be narrowed on what you can do to achieve that, because the average company, particularly those small businesses, isn't going to be able to go to the shop and buy a new router, even a home router with the right encryption in. So there's definitely a problem. Yeah. It doesn't hit every type of encryption.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
So I think that's not understood, that actually there's whole chunks of stuff that won't be affected, but yes, there's whole chunks of stuff that will be. But the average organisation is going to have to wait for the products. And then if you look, most industries are running 20, 30-year-old, as well as most modern compute equipment. So there's a reality of back to the businesses can't afford to invest in everything at once.
Yeah, yeah. I think
so it's
it
a
does
bit
make
of a
sense. Well, to me, to solve the problem with it, first of all, you have to agree there is a problem that's coming. And I think we're saying there is a problem that's coming. Yeah. I think when you then go, there's products and tools that can help you discover within your business where that problem sits within your asset.
Yeah, back to complexity of the business.
Exactly. So you all your assets, where does it sit? Where we've got the right kind of encryption in place that is going to be impacted by PQC, and quantum itself and being cracked and all of these things. So, and there's a piece of work that I know of that there was I think it was something like 600,000 pieces of encryption, and it was 10% of that was impacted within this business of So 60,000 pieces of encryption that was PQC relevant. That was just the discovery, right? What to do about all of those pieces of encryption where they sat within a complex enterprise organization in finance or whatever. What to do about that? The man hours, the man days, if a product wasn't there to do it for you, is huge. Yep. It's the change is significant if it gets there. So the governments are right in the way that they're talking about where are your plans, how are you going to find the discovery, how are you going to understand where the impact will be. What you do about that will have we haven't got enough people to be able to solve the problem if it's just 10% of everything goes. So first of all, we're acknowledging there is a problem. Second of all, we need to understand what the problem is. Third of all, we need to understand where that problem impacts against the business risk that we've talked about. And you do sound like a business consultant these days, John, not just a CISO. and I think, as we go through all of that, I think we'll get some of the answers. But, again, it's like the AI bit. It is here. PQC is here. We do need to understand it more, and we need to work together as a community, vendors, suppliers, businesses themselves to kind of solve that problem. And a country. We need to do it as a country as well.
I'm glad it's being spoken about more, because it was one of those that's been bubbling around for like 5-10 years. So I'm happy that it's accelerated in the amount it's being discussed, because then hopefully people are starting to consider it more and taking steps to identify what it looks like for me as an organization. Because if it didn't, then...
Well, I think the government, let's hold up,
they do some things right.
Yeah, NCSC have done a good job in what, if you read their papers, it's really, really good. I like them, and I think their role in identifying and, let's focus in on this and get some plans together. I think the plans, my view is that the plans are too elongated and they'll come in. I mentioned that earlier. Listen, I think we can talk again forever on PQC. Let's drop that. I'm going to suggest we have a short break, if that's all right with everybody.
That's fine by me.
Guys, thanks very much for rejoining us there. A bit of a comfort break. I want to jump in. I'm going to go in a bit of detail. We're lucky today to have someone here from Bitdefender. There are products out there. There are competitive products to yourself, Nick. And one of the areas I wanted to kind of ask you specifically about is around that kind of reducing attack surface and how you would go about that. And I know Bitdefender have brought some things into play that allows that question that I've just asked to be answered. Can you just explain that to us from, we are speaking specifically around Bitdefender and what they're doing. I think it's called Phasar. I'm not sure what that stands for. Can you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, so it's called Phasar. It's a new product of ours. It stands for Proactive Hardening and Attack Surface Reduction. And essentially what it does, and if we go back to kind of why it's needed as well, a lot of threats at the moment we're seeing are coming through and are doing what we call living off the land. So a threat actor gets onto the environment, gets onto the endpoint, whatever it may be, and essentially is using native tools, so tools that exist on the device already, whether it's something like a PowerShell or something that maybe an IT admin would typically use. And they're able to basically perform their attack vector, their attack sequence using those tools rather than bringing malicious tools onto the device itself. And instead of creating a kind of a configuration or a kind of checklist of configurations for that device, which would be the same for every user that use that device across an organization, what Phasar does is it analyzes the behavior of an individual, how they engage with that device, whether it's, for example, me and my laptop or me and my mobile, because I'll interact differently, accessing different tools, utilizing different services. And it dynamically, using AI, changes the configuration of that device depending on how I'm using it. So for example, say I'm an IT admin and I'm using PowerShell, the specific functionality would stay alive, it would stay enabled. Whereas if I'm not in IT and I don't use PowerShell or I never use an encrypted PowerShell command, it would disable that. But it would still allow, for example, you may have a software that's running on that device that actually behind the scenes uses PowerShell or uses something else that you may not be using. It would still allow those essentially non-malicious activity that are standard for that device and the behavior of the device to still take place, but it won't allow anything that's not intended to take place. And it dynamically changes it and it starts to learn the behavior of the user and their device over time, and it starts to tailor it.
So it understands the particular user within a particular business. Then if someone got into admin and got that user's admin and started doing something different, it would say on a second.
It just
they
wouldn't
stop.
let the action take place. Yeah, I mean, in
Okay.
the past, organizations, as I said, would have like a baseline for a
Yeah.
Windows device. They would, have blacklist and whitelist depending on which approach they take for things like applications to allow that to be on or not on the device. Whereas now, instead of it being something for all users, whereby if a malicious actor got onto one device, they knew if they could perform an action on one, they could likely pivot across the network and do the same action on another device. The idea now is if they get onto a single device and pivot across, something they could do on one, they probably couldn't do on another.
Okay.
So the idea
So
is
it's slowing down the
it slows
attack.
it down. Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, any organization that we've done a red team on that has the technology enabled, it's very annoying. It's very annoying for us. So hopefully most of my customers that we do red teams on don't have it in place.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's obviously very beneficial for the end customers.
I like the idea of it, and I like the, do you see that? Do you see that packaged in a way to bring value to? I'm very, initially concerned about the SME world, the SMB world. So,
Yep.
can they take that in and put that onto their services on the endpoint or however you do it?
So, I mean, at the moment, Phase is sold in two different ways. Not that we're going around that, but essentially it dovetails with our EDR, or there's a standalone version that can dovetail with other EDR providers.
Okay.
So it can be used in a number of different ways. But yeah, it massively helps. In the past, people would look at the kind of perimeter focus only. Now we can say that if someone was to get in, which as we all know, it's a matter of when, not if. But when they are in, now you're limiting what they can do. And especially for a small SME that maybe isn't very technically focused and is probably not using a lot of these tools that the threat actors are leveraging, it's probably more valuable to them because you can really, really configure and shut down a lot of what's on the systems. I mean, we looked at, I think it was 700,000 different incidents over the last kind of 12 months in 2025. And it was around 95% of those or something like that were using living off the land attacks or tools from living off the land. So it's something that we're going to see as being very valuable. And so far it's being adopted very quickly across the SME market specifically.
Okay.
A lot of what Bitdefender is doing at the moment is moving more to that proactivity. And to your point before, it's harder to train someone and say, don't do this in the future. Yeah. Whereas if you just reduce something, so the likelihood of it happening or the impact on what can actually happen is thwarted, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay, let me. I'm going to jump. Thanks, Nick. That was really useful. Let's jump into. I asked this at the very beginning. You may have forgotten it after I asked the question about where we're going. IT/OT. What do we do? Not the OT, the person who does the dancing on the. Have I got thingies Saturday night dancing at the missus watches? OT is
Operational.
Yeah, exactly. Operational technology. What do we do with that? You hear people talking about, well, we need to create an air gap. When other people say, well, we need to get it closer. At the end of the world, at the end of the day, we've got OT systems sitting there that have been running for years. They're black boxes. Any business that I've talked to on an enterprise scale are scared to touch these things and worried about them all the time. We've seen big breaches that have made national press where systems have been stopped and, governments have had to potentially get involved to bail out. All these different things that happen. What do we do to solve that issue? And again, we could talk for hours, but I'll just direct that one. IT, OT, where are we? Where's the vendor community? Where's the CISO community? Where are we on that?
I think it's back to functionality has happened in the manufacturing type of OT, operational technology space, not just manufacturing, but controllers and that area where the functional requirements of joining it up to IT products and internets for business efficiency, robotic control, artificial intelligence, interpretation of quality on a production line has gone on faster than the technology tools that help manage it in the security world.
Yeah.
So I think in some areas, particularly around where maybe safety systems were inherently part of that model, whether you're thinking about nuclear or sort of human danger, I think they're probably much more advanced in those buckets. But that was probably driven by the human impact of safety, the regulatory impact in those industry sectors, whereas lots of more commercial industry sectors haven't historically had the regulation to push that into place.
I agree.
Then you go back to the point I made, even on the IT side about legacy equipment, and you've just said the same about operational technology. Sometimes people swapped what was an old-fashioned manual serial cable connector that you connect a device to code it, to now just putting in a network card to replace it, because those things are expensive to replace production lines and things. So I think we're still learning in most sectors how to join those together. The reality is they are joined together.
Yeah.
So I think it's more a case of how do you bring engineering, which is focused on availability,
Yeah.
is a production line working on, the machines are oiled, and we've got to again teach each other a different language because the IT people have come, many cases historically, more from my data's at risk. So sometimes availability, unless it has been like a website like you mentioned earlier, has not been the experience of the IT or the security people.
Yeah.
And so that reblending, I think it's going to be cars again. It has to be. So if you think about your car garage, whatever manufacturer you have, if they now manufacture electric cars, they had to retrain all their mechanical engineers to learn two things.
Yeah.
So a wheel's still a wheel, but it's now an electric car, which doesn't have the same internal contents as a combustion engine. They went through a transformation of teaching their engineers and mechanics something different.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do the same from both perspectives and join those people together.
Okay. And listen, I'll say it now. We're going to come back to this podcast on another day. We're going to have a version 2 of this because we're going to pick up. There's so many things we've talked about. I really do want to kind of get together again and go through some deeper thinking on some of these topics, and we'll do that. We'll organise that again. I think we started this journey off talking about where's the threat landscape for 2026 for the CISOs. We've gone into everything. We've covered everything. We could spend hours on the different topics. I've really enjoyed it. I hope the people who listen to this or watch this enjoy it. I really want to thank you two for your time. I hope you've got something out of it and you've enjoyed it too. So thanks for coming along. Thanks for spending the time with us today. And again, we'll have a version 2 and we'll pick it up again if you're happy with that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Nick.
Cheers.